Hello everyone, this is Frederick Dortmund from coherentlifecoaching.com, and this time I want to expand a little bit on the video that I made last time, which was dealing with physical health. I was talking about the principle of use it or lose it, so if you're interested in that, definitely check that out. And today we are going to take a look at a TED Talk which is called Run for Your Life at a Comfortable Pace and Not Too Far. And James O'Keefe, the presenter, is a cardiologist, so we are talking about heart health in general. And specifically, we're talking about the amount of running that is kind of required, or the effect that running has on your overall health. And so let's begin.
I'm a cardiologist, but before that, I was an exercise enthusiast. I've exercised, I'll bet, pretty much every day of my life. I had two grandfathers who were alcoholics, but for me, my way of coping with life is exercise. When I'm nervous or anxious or tired or happy or sad or whatever, I exercise if I have the time.
Now, so it's a very interesting opener and very important opener, I believe, because he is talking about himself as, in the past at least, as an ultra endurance athlete, right? So they're quite famous. A lot of them are, of course, professional athletes. And so it's a very honest and very important statement to say that for a lot of these ultra endurance athletes, not all of them, of course, but for a lot of them, their exercise is a form of a coping strategy. So as he said, it could be alcohol, right? For other people, it's overeating. So eating a lot of fatty foods, especially. And all of these things, exercise, over-exercise, overeating, and the consumption of drugs, of course, of alcohol, but also other hard drugs, they all have the same purpose, which is to numb yourself to your own emotions, right? So it's taking away yourself from facing your own bad emotions. So we're gonna jump ahead to 230.
When the baby boomers came of age, another boom happened, the running boom. If exercise was good for you, as anybody could know, then more had to be better. And what was the ultimate sort of test of running endurance was a marathon. There was a physician who became famous back in the mid-70s by boldly proclaiming that if you could complete a marathon, you were immune to heart attack. This urban myth actually still holds sway with a lot of physicians. One of my patients and friends is John. He's 68 now, but he's been running for 45 years. As he puts it, if he hasn't run 12 miles in a day, he felt like he was wimping out. When I saw him, he came in to see me, and I said, John, let's do a cardio scan on you. It's a CT scan, simple, little, non-invasive, quick, high-tech scan of your heart. Your arteries, I'm sure, will be soft and supple and clean and healthy. So that's what a normal cardio scan should look like, no calcium whatsoever in these arteries. His is over here. His score was 1,800. Anything above 0 is abnormal. Anything above 400 is severe. At 1,800, his arteries are harder than his bones.
His arteries. I like that. So we have this CT scan, right? And it's a bit unfortunate. I mean, I'm not an amateur, but I have seen CT scans before, and so even I have no idea what we're looking at. I maybe this white stuff is the calcification, but he told us that the score of 1,800 is severe. So let's talk a little bit about what is going on. This calcification is really arteriosclerosis rather. And arteriosclerosis is a very important concept to get familiar with if you're interested in living a healthy life. So this is the Wikipedia article. They say the exact cause is not known. Risk factors include abnormal cholesterol levels. So cholesterol is a form of fat. High blood pressure, diabetes, smoking, obesity, family history, and an unhealthy diet. Plaque, which is the stuff that accumulates, is made up of fat, cholesterol, which is a form of fat, calcium, and other substances found in the blood. So we have this picture a little bit wider. So these are the different stages of severity of atherosclerosis, and it says that the fatty streak, mainly intracellular lipid accumulation, and lipid, right? So this stuff accumulates on the cell walls. Lipids. A lipid is chemically defined as a substance that is insoluble in water and soluble in alcohol. Lipids are an important component of living cells. Together with carbohydrates and proteins, lipids are the main constituents of plant and animal cells. Cholesterol and triglycerides are lipids, right? So that's very important. So the reason I put emphasis on this is that, first of all, it's fascinating that the exact cause is not known, right? How would you find the cause of atherosclerosis? Well, really, it would be a number of things. One of those things is what can reverse atherosclerosis, or what can prevent atherosclerosis from forming in the first place. And that's interesting. So they're made up of fat, cholesterol, calcium, and other substances. So if the stuff can't, if we don't have the building blocks of plaque in our blood, then atherosclerosis can't happen. What about fat, right? The fat, and that's exactly the point. This is an article of Life Science, and it says why this man's blood turned milky colored. So this person, these are different blood samples, had an extremely high blood fat level. And so this is why this turned milky, because all of these microscopic blood droplets, if you will, they're in the blood, and they're making this milky. This should be clear. The plasma, which is on top, should separate from the heavier red blood cell portion of the blood. But it's milky because of all of that fat. Because when you eat a fatty meal, the fat gradually enters the bloodstream just as the sugar does, in order to get transported around the body to the cells and for further processing. Now, the human is not designed to eat, to consume a lot of overt fat. The human body is designed to eat a very low amount of fat. And so what happens is these teeny tiny droplets enter the bloodstream, and they clog up a lot of the cells, and they clog the blood cells themselves as well. Now it's a whole mess, but what I found so fascinating is that how little emphasis was put on the actual cause, or what the real, and diet especially. The authors hypothesized that the man's extremely high blood triglyceride levels were caused by a combination of insulin resistance, obesity, inappropriate diet, and insufficiently treated diabetes. Right? So inappropriate diet, they don't even say what that would be, but it's just so fascinating. The triglycerides are blood fat. So what did he eat? They didn't say what he ate. I mean, that's if you don't eat fat, then you can't have elevated blood levels like this. And one thing I want to add here is that there is a way to prevent and reverse heart disease, and there are peer-reviewed studies out there, and it's well proven. And a great book to read on that is How to Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease by Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn. Illustrates that a plant-based, oil-free diet can not only prevent the progression of heart disease, but can also reverse its effects. We're going to continue here.
Add years to your life, and even life to your years. So could it be shortening your life expectancy? I'm not worried about dropping in a race. I just trying to do the right thing. I'm a cardiologist. I'm in the business of finding out the ideal diet and lifestyle. And
diet and lifestyle.
That running marathons and extreme endurance athletics do not fit into that recipe. So, that being said, let me be clear about this. There is no single step you can take in your life to ensure robust health and remarkable longevity than a habit of daily exercise. Okay, and this is a study of over 400,000 Chinese that was just published within the last year. We published an editorial.
So this is a very important graph. So it's showing daily physical activity in minutes, and it's graphed against the all-cause mortality, right? So we can see that if you exercise vigorously, then only a small amount, up to 45 minutes of daily exercise vigorously, so it's high intensity exercise, is going to have a very dramatic effect on your reduction in all-cause mortality. Now, moderate exercise has naturally a much different slope, in that you have to do much more of it every day in order to get a certain amount of reduction in all-cause mortality, and you can't get as much of a benefit from moderate exercise compared to the vigorous exercise. Now we continue here.
Capacities. And this is a fascinating study done by a cardiologist that I know and his son, who's also a cardiologist. These were both avid runners up in Minnesota. They did a study looking at the CT scans, like I showed you of John's. They looked at a group of marathoners who've been doing this for at least 25 years, at least 25 marathons during that time, compared to sedentary controls. And you can see here, they had 62% more plaque despite fewer risk factors.
Right, so they had more plaque despite fewer risk factors, right? And that's very general, risk factors. And it's so confusing to me when he just says risk factors, because, and again on Wikipedia it says the cause is not known, but it's so obvious to me that when the actual plaque, which is a real problem, is made up of fat, cholesterol, calcium, and other substances. Well, if you reduce in those substances, then you won't have atherosclerosis, right? So what contains a lot of fat and cholesterol? Animal foods, right? Cholesterol is only found in animal food, and cholesterol is produced by the human himself, by the human body. We don't need to ingest cholesterol, which is especially present in eggs of chickens. And fat is also very dominant in animal foods because there is no carbohydrates. So whatever animal foods you eat, all the calories come from either fat or protein. I mean, carbohydrates is negligible. So fat and cholesterol both is basically animal foods, right? And we can see from the graph itself that exercise is not going to prevent you from developing heart disease. Now there's another statistic he's presenting.
So this was a look at 50,000 runners. I mean, 50,000 people, 52,000 people.
And this graph is not very readable. So we have this graph here, and on the x-axis we can see the running distance in miles per week. And again, we see the all-case mortality on the y-axis. The non-runners are the reference at 1. And it's important to note that the y-axis starts at 0.5, right? So obviously there's no way to reduce your mortality to 0%, but it's important. So at most we have a reduction of about, 27% in mortality if you run between 10 and 15 miles a week. So we see this U form, right? This U shape rather, of the non-runners having a higher chance of mortality, and the extreme runners, the runners who run like over 20 miles a week, have a higher mortality once again, right? Not as high as the non-runners, but we see this U shape. So what we can derive from that is that exercise in general is healthy. Now we jump towards the end of the talk. What are some of his conclusions?
All things in moderation is not a new concept.
He said all things in moderation.
This was something that one of Phidippides' contemporaries, the father of medicine, said 2,500 years ago: the right amount of nourishment and exercise, not too much, not too little, is the safest way to health.
Now, all things in moderation, I would argue, is a gross oversimplification, and it really doesn't help to live a more healthful life. I don't think that all things in moderation really clear up what it is, what it needs, what it takes to live a healthy life, because there are things that you can't get too much of, which is something like sleep, and I can't think of anything else. So you shouldn't get sleep in moderation. You should get as much sleep as your body needs. What about things like smoking and alcohol? Alcohol is just another neurotoxin, like many things out there, many chemicals out there, and therefore it should not be consumed at all. Yet all things in moderation sounds kind of like you can have a little bit of toxicity every day, right? And I think there are studies that say that a glass of wine makes you actually live longer and stuff. But I mean, even if that is true, then the principle still holds true that you shouldn't consume toxic chemicals, toxic substances, right? So the right amount of nourishment, it doesn't specify what is actually good for your body. So this talk goes into detail about, one, the calcification of arteries, which is arteriosclerosis, and two, the aspect that I didn't cover here, which is when you exercise too much, overexercise, then the heart scars up and becomes firm over time, and that's one of the reasons why ultra endurance athleticism is not healthy. Now, even though the speaker has talked extensively about the building up of plaque or the calcification of the arteries, he didn't once tell us what it actually means to eat healthily. And that's, I think, very, very underwhelming. And I think it's partly because he doesn't really know why himself. And it's in general, I see very much, even in these articles that deal with the problem of arteriosclerosis, which causes heart disease and strokes and is a huge cause of mortality in the Western affluent world, that we don't get to understand what it actually, what it actually is caused by. And so it's really upsetting to me, and I believe it's not helping people to live actually healthfully, because it says things like all things in moderation. So I can eat everything I want, I just need to keep it in moderate, right? And it's not going to make you healthy. Maybe it's going to reduce mortality a little bit. But for as long as you don't understand what the actual bad stuff is that you should not consume at all and not in moderation, how can you live healthfully? Right? So the real principle, the good principle, the more less simplified and more helpful principle is that you should get everything that is good for you in moderation except sleep, and nothing or as little as possible of the stuff that is bad for you. So you shouldn't smoke at all. You shouldn't consume alcohol at all. You shouldn't consume animal fat or animal products at all, because the human body is not designed for that. And you shouldn't consume refined foods at all. No refined carbohydrates like sugar, no refined fats like oils, no refined proteins like protein shakes or something, because the human body, as every other animal in the entire world, is not designed to consume refined foods, right? So it's not all things in moderation. It is the things that are promoting health in moderation, and as little as possible, ideally nothing of the stuff that damages your health.